Let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking a really brilliant explainer based on the paper The Bent Woman and the Binding of Satan. We're going to take a familiar story from the Gospel of Luke, a quiet, seemingly simple healing, and flip it completely on its head. Because as you'll see, this wasn't just a medical miracle. It was a public declaration of cosmic war.
So think about this for a second. Is it possible that a quiet healing in a local synagogue was actually a tactical, targeted strike against the powers of darkness? To figure that out, we kind of have to look at how we normally read this story and why we might be getting it totally wrong. Most of the time, we totally domesticate this narrative using our modern lenses, right? We reduce it down to a simple tableau of compassion. Jesus just doing a nice thing for a hurting person. Or maybe we see it as a moral polemic against religious legalism, like a debate about Sabbath rules. Or, because a lot of us don't really have a category for the unseen realm, we just diagnose it as a generic medical condition, like a severe spinal deformity. And sure, the compassion and the critique of legalism are definitely there, but limiting ourselves to just those categories means we're missing something absolutely massive. Because the actual source text, it totally shatters those safe, neat little categories. It uses incredibly specific supernatural vocabulary that we literally cannot just ignore. The text explicitly says this woman had a spirit of infirmity, and that she was someone whom Satan has bound for 18 years. Guys, that is not the vocabulary of your standard medical diagnosis, and it's for sure not just some colorful metaphor for bad luck. Which brings us to reading the right dictionary, which is honestly the methodological key to unlocking this whole mystery. See, to understand this frankly bizarre language, we have to look at the correct historical era. Interpreters actually make a critical chronological error all the time here. Instead of using later rabbinic literature from the 300 CE to decode the text, we really need to rewind. We have to look at the Second Temple literature, the stuff that was circulating right before the New Testament was written. That is what shaped the minds of the authors and, crucially, their very first readers. If we just apply modern medical textbooks or medieval church categories to this text, we completely miss the author's original supernatural intent. We've got to swap out our glasses. We have to use ancient lenses, categories like supernatural conflict, unseen realms, and apocalyptic warfare, if we want to read the text in its own world. So, let's talk about the language of cosmic war, and specifically decode what binding and loosing actually meant back then. Let's look at the exact vocabulary Jesus used in the synagogue that day. In the literature of that era, binding wasn't about establishing church rules or, creating religious laws. It was a highly technical term. It meant the subjugation of a hostile spiritual being to render it completely powerless, containing the evil it unleashed. Think of ancient apocalyptic literature where fallen angels are literally bound hand and foot. It's the vocabulary of supernatural overpowering. On the flip side, loosing carried an equally specific meaning. It meant freeing the human victim from the grip and the captivity of that exact same dark, malevolent force. When you look at the mechanics of deliverance, these aren't two separate events happening in sequence. They are inverse faces of the exact same event. It's kind of like a hostage situation. The very second the hostage taker is handcuffed or bound, the hostage is simultaneously loosed and set free. So by declaring the woman loosed, Jesus is publicly announcing that the spirit afflicting her has just been bound. But who exactly was this spirit? Well, the ancient world didn't view evil as just this undifferentiated, blurry mass. They had a specific taxonomy of powers. At the very top, the first tier, is Satan, the original adversary. Then you step down to pre-flood heavenly rebels, followed by territorial powers that ruled over nations, and finally, at the bottom, the fourth tier, you have disembodied demons, afflicting spirits seeking physical bodies. The text tells us Satan is the ultimate architect of this woman's bondage, but the immediate agent holding her down was a lower-tier demon acting as his foot soldier. Now, here's a really crucial point: understanding the difference between affliction and full-blown possession. This woman was physically oppressed by a lower-tier demon. It was folding her in half, but she was not fully possessed. Notice there was no demonic outcry, no convulsion, no creepy dialogue with the spirit. She was physically pinned down by this entity, but her mind and her will, they were completely her own. And we have to maintain some strict textual discipline here. The paper points out that while this specific ailment was demonically mediated, and yes, demonic affliction is absolutely real in the text, this is not some universal claim that all sickness is demonic. The Gospels routinely draw a hard line between healing ordinary diseases and casting out spirits. We shouldn't generalize this one specific supernatural event into a blanket medical theory. The text observes restraint, and well, so should we. Moving right along to the exorcist king and his messianic credentials in the unseen realm. This brings up a super fascinating historical puzzle. If you look at the canonical Hebrew prophets, where exactly does it say the Messiah will be an exorcist? Spoiler alert, it doesn't. You'll find prophecies about healing the blind, the deaf, the lame, but you will not find exorcism in the Messiah's job description. So why on earth do the people expect it? And how did they connect the dots so fast? The answer is actually hidden in the traditions that grew between the Old and New Testaments. In the cultural memory of that era, King Solomon's legendary wisdom wasn't just about ruling a kingdom. It was believed to include absolute mastery over nature and spirits. He was actually remembered as an expeller of demons. On top of that, King David's psalms, like Psalm 91, were used by people as literal protective songs against the possessed. They were viewed as an armory against midday and nighttime demons. So the coming Davidic king, he was fully expected to inherit this exact power over the dark realm. Because of this, titles mattered immensely. The title, Son of the Most High, represented the God of Israel's absolute supremacy over all rival territorial gods and spirits. So when Jesus casually casts out a demon, the audience immediately recognizes the signature. It's the Son of the Most High, the true Davidic king exercising his rightful inherited authority over the powers of darkness. It was an unmistakable credential.
Which brings us to the ultimate Sabbath liberation and reclaiming the cosmos.
We've arrived at the climax of this whole investigation. 18. For 18 long, grueling years, this woman was physically folded down upon herself. She literally couldn't look anyone in the eye. That is 18 years serving as a captive on enemy-occupied territory. The text doesn't just throw that number out there casually. It's highlighting the sheer, agonizing length and cruelty of this demonic bondage. And here is where the tragic irony hits. The synagogue leader looks at this incredible moment and sees nothing but a violation of the law. Unauthorized labor performed on a day of rest. He completely, utterly missed the cosmic reality standing right in front of him. But Jesus saw the exact opposite. This wasn't a violation. It was the absolute ultimate fulfillment of the Sabbath. This was the liberation that brings true, profound rest. This wasn't just a healing, it was a Sabbath D-Day. Think about it. The Sabbath signifies rest and release from bondage, pointing all the way back to the Exodus from Egypt. So overthrowing Satan's 18-year bondage of this woman, that fulfills the day's truest, deepest purpose. Jesus just exposes their hypocrisy, basically saying, you'd gladly untie an ox to drink water on the Sabbath. How much more should a daughter of Abraham be loosed from Satan's grip? In that moment, a quiet local synagogue becomes the public battlefield of cosmic reclamation. As the author of our source text so beautifully puts it, each act of liberation is a reclamation, a recovery of ground long held by the enemy. This seemingly small moment was actually a massive public D-Day. It was the opening operation of a king systematically reclaiming humanity from the dominion of the adversary. Which leaves us with this really profound thought. How does recognizing this invisible cosmic war change the way you read other ancient texts? Or, honestly, how does it change the way you view the struggles in your own world today? If we've been misreading a story like this for centuries simply because we were using the wrong dictionary, what other hidden realities are we missing when we look at history without seeing the unseen realm? It's something that should absolutely change how we engage with these ancient sources going forward.